Welcome everybody. Patrick Sheehan, CEO of the Fellsway Group, back for another edition of our Digital Resilience series. Today, I'm very honored to have Dmitriy Sokolovskiy, CISO at Avid, joining our series. Dmitry, good afternoon.
Hi, Patrick. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Dmitry, for our audience, would you mind just spending a little time giving us a background on yourself and your organization, please?
Sure. I started in IT at the turn of the century, around 2000. For the first 10 years or so, I've been working pretty much in all assets of IT, from just IT desktop support, servers, data centers, network operations centers, security operations centers, consulting for a number of different companies, public, private, medical, financial, defense contractors, nonprofits, all over the place. Then I spent about 11 years at a information security vendor, CyberArk Software, a pretty well-known vendor. Was running a big chunk of their professional services organization here in the Americas. And we were in the field for some of the largest breaches and remediation activities in the US and I mean, global history. Later at CyberArk, I was working as their cloud security architect as well, helping create and deploy the security SaaS offerings that they have. For the last 2 years, I've been a CISO at Avid Technology, which develops software and integrated solutions for video and content creation and management. The clients for Avid span the media and entertainment industry, movies, music recordings, TV shows, live concerts, sporting events, you name it, Olympics, Super Bowls, and so on. Really, really cool job. And so for the last couple of years, we've been building out a security program at Avid.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, tremendous background. And I think for our audience, don't think it's too dissimilar from any of the roles that we see, right? Folks kind of come up through the ranks, so to speak, and then ultimately move into leadership. And we've seen a lot of CISOs that have come up through different parts of the IT organization. With your background working at CyberArk and experiencing multiple companies, I think gives you a great lens for our discussion today. So one thing that I just want to pick on real quick is, so you've been a CISO, it's your first CISO job, you've been 2 years. This is many people's aspirations for their careers as they come through the ranks. You happy that you got there?
Absolutely. It's a great opportunity. Just a lot has been done, but there's so much more to do. And it's very fulfilling to be able to do this work and help the business.
Fantastic. So we're going to dig into that a little bit. I mean, I think that there's varying levels of CISOs, folks that have been in the organization for a number of years, others that are new. There's been a lot of turnover and transition in the market. When you came into this role with the background that you have, I mean, how did you start? Where did you start? And any guidance for the folks out there in regards to when they're in a new role, what do you do and where do you start?
It depends on the role, depends on the situation you enter. Depending on the maturity level of the program that you step into, you may need to spend first couple of months, maybe 2 to 3 months, quietly learning. I know some situations where CISOs came in and they weren't even introduced as CISOs for the first 2 or 3 months. They were just quietly sitting there as consultants, collecting data, talking to people as if they were consultants, and then brought in as CISOs to actually resolve and fix situations they discover. In some other cases, when it's a new environment, new program, you may not have the maturity within the organization to start with a framework or start actually sort of on a structured path to deployment of a security program. You may have to be doing what basically amounts to incident response for the first year or two, just to paraphrase from a DevOps book, to stabilize the patient. What do you spend the most time dealing with? And concentrate on resolving those issues first, even though they might not be number one, number two issue on this, the standard security list of things. But those will create a lot more time for you to be able to then approach it in a structured manner.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think there's a wide variety of organizations and their maturation of cyber, right? It's a cultural thing. You might be a bank, that the next company might be a bank, the previous company might be a bank and have the same business, but what a dramatic difference maybe in culture, tolerance for risk, cyber program maturity, care abouts. Yeah, I think it's all over the map, which makes the role really difficult, right? But going in eyes wide open, I think some people are builders, right, and want to transform things, and others want to just maintain. So addressing that up front, probably during the interview process, would be a good thing.
I agree. And just a quick comment on that.
Basically.
I think it's super important to know what kind of a CISO you are, not necessarily what kind of CISO they're looking for, although that's important. You got to know what you are.
Sure.
And there's 5 or 6 different types of CISOs: transformational, maintenance. You got to be honest with yourself what you like doing, what you're really good at, know what that is, and then you look for the opportunities for that. You may not be best suited to build an organization from scratch, but you'll be amazing at maintaining a formalized system, which some other people will be really, really tough to deal with. So again, sort of self-assessment is super important.
Oh, super important. Emotional intelligence, regardless of role, I think is critical, right? Yeah. It's alignment at the end of the day, right? Expectation setting. Do you need a Michael Jordan or do you need a Dennis Rodman, right? That the series has gone on, so it's top of mind. So yeah, I mean, and there's vastly different pay structures, roles, and responsibilities. So I think that's an important point for takeaway. So regardless of where you are and where you're stepping into, you pick something that maybe you're going down a framework, maybe it's structured, maybe it's not, but at first you should be learning. And I think when you learn, it's really about the business and the culture, right? Irrespective of the maturity, or if you're an incident response and triaging, or digitally transforming or modernizing, or whatever the term may be. But I think it's about business alignment. And I think you kind of harped on that. We talked a little bit about that previously. I think business alignment is something that's often spoken about, but I don't know if it's really ever detailed in what that really means. I think it could, just like the role, just like the responsibilities, it could be vastly different, but I think it's incumbent upon everybody to make sure that we're setting ourselves up for success and an expectation setting by being aligned to the business. So I know we talked about that in the past. What is business alignment for you as a CISO? What does that mean?
Understanding is probably the most important thing. You have to know your business. You have to know from the top down and then from the bottom up different components of the business and how they operate. It has almost nothing to do with information security directly, but it has everything to do with the decisions you make in how do you apply your resources, how you apply how you prioritize things, and how you work with different parts of the business. In many ways, CISOs need to know their business almost as good as CFOs. And in that way, they're actually they're pretty related. You have to spend time with the business to learn what they do, what more importantly, what they find important for them, what their pains and problems are, and what the risks are, what are they afraid of. And then that is what's going to be the ground, the foundation on which you'll then be able to plant controls, solutions, acceptance, behavior, mitigation tactics, whatever you decide to do, it's going to be driven by the business. And at the end of the day, really, you don't end up making a lot of decisions yourself. You're helping them make decisions, and you help them make the decisions with some maybe tools or, people, processes, techniques, tools. All those things is what you bring to the table. That's what we know. What they know is the business. So if we got to work together, they tell us what the problem is, and we're going to try and figure it out together.
Yeah, totally agree. And it goes back to that alignment. It goes back to, we talked a little bit earlier about the business impact analysis. To get to that tolerance level, or risk appetite, or whatever you want to call it, I think that's critical, because then you can identify, to your point, what risks are acceptable, right? I don't need to spend time on that right now because it's just not a priority. Which ones do I need to mitigate because we've identified that we have some risks that need to be addressed, or maybe they're business procedures that need to be reevaluated because it's above the tolerance that the organization has, and maybe there's things outside of our control that we're just not able to cover So let's find a compensating control, whether it be insurance or contract language, to make sure that we're deferring those and focusing back and executing, to your point earlier, around the expectations that the business has. And ultimately, as cyber leaders, it's about giving the information northbound so that the business leaders can make risk-informed decisions. There's multiple risks across the business. Cyber is obviously one of them. But how do we drive those metrics or that data back up so that they can make more informed decisions about the risks that they want us to go resolve, so to speak?
Exactly. To your point, our mission statement for my team is helping business make better risk decisions. It really all boils down to it. And at the end of the day, I think, information security in general used to be part of IT. We also have considered it to be the IT function or an IT function. And it's starting, because of this conversation, because of this thinking, it's starting to move up into being parallel to IT, or maybe even higher, being parallel to risk management, risk assessment, risk compliance, governance. Kind of all of those functions benefit from this kind of input from the structured risk management that we can bring to the table.
Agreed. We've had this debate, my partner and I, about there's not just a cyber risk. It's not solely related to cyber. There's a financial, operational, reputational impact that spans much further than information technology that we're ultimately responsible for. So it's about creating that culture of awareness and accountability. How have you addressed that? I think it's an important piece, and most organizations and CISOs struggle with that alignment. Any anecdotes of maybe in your first 2 years as the CISO, how you started to create more accountability and alignment within the organization?
Yes, a couple of stories. So, and I can't take credit for this approach. I picked it up from one of the conferences. MITRE, CISO from MITRE, had this idea about transferring risk decisions to the business, and we've copied it and are slowly implementing it. So this is kind of the story from that approach. We have a business midline manager is looking to do something, implement or roll something out, and this midline manager, now having discovered that there is a CISO, there is actually an information security team in the company, that knowledge is slowly propagating. And we also sort of walk around and introduce ourselves and continuously get in people's conversations just to get that awareness up. But now that they come to us and they say, all right, we're trying to do this thing. Give us the approval to do this thing. And the first response is, hey, well, it's not going to be my approval to do this thing. Let's first talk about what is it that you're trying to do. Yep. And so we're talking about it. We figure out all the different parts of what's happening. Remember, the risk of business understanding is important here. I got to know what is it that we're trying to do as a business. What's the goal? What are you trying to achieve? And there is a particular goal and that they're trying to get done. Okay, great. Now let's figure out what the threats are. What is it that we're going to be worried about? And this is where our knowledge comes in. Now it's not about FUD. It's not about the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. That's not the point. The point is very realistic review of what are the threats, what can happen here, and what is the cost if it does happen. And that's when we start working with the business. We identify all those things. And we realize that, I realize already that what we're going to get out of it, if it's successful, is not, we're talking magnitudes difference of what the potential cost would be if something goes wrong, the risks. But it's not I don't want it to be me. I don't want to be the roadblock to say no. So I say, okay, we've identified this is what you're trying to do. These are the various risks and things that we're facing. Great. Let's go talk to your boss. Wait, what do you mean my boss? Well, I'm not the one going to be making a decision. It's not going to be my boss making this decision. Are you kidding me? You're telling me this is good for business. Who am I to say no? Who am I to say that's not the case? And that's when understanding comes into that, that manager's mind. And we go to the supervisor, to whom that is also clear that the benefit that we're getting, the realistic benefit, the value, the money we're going to make, is nowhere close to the risk that this represents. But the bottom line is now this manager, the high-level manager, has to put their name down as I accept these risks. And so immediately, I didn't even start a conversation. This manager started saying, well, what can we do about mitigating some of these risks? And I go, we got option 1, 2, and 3. There's varying costs. We could do this. We already have this tool and that tool we can help with, and then these other things we can add. And so through this process, this conversation, we end up with a very sort of trial run of what the initial proposal was, using the mitigating controls we had to lower the risk for the size of the trial run we had, but not the overall initial expansion. At the end of the day, what ended up happening is the initial business owner actually got movement in what they were trying to do to a potential benefit to the company. The senior manager was in a position to thoughtfully accept risk for the company, and my name was nowhere near the approval lines for any of this. And so that was good. And, success there. The best part is that, I don't know, a month and a half later, that same group of people, that same business line had another project. I learned about it first. I learned about it in really early brainstorming conversations because their thought process was, that was amazing that we were able to get it done this way, but let's get him pulled in way earlier. And so we've achieved a lot of these things are still not formalized. Like we don't have the GRC tools. And if you don't have the budgets for any of this stuff, it's okay. Because if I think about what just happened, I can say that we have a risk management program. No, it's not a formalized risk management program. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles, but you've just assess the risk, you help the business make risk decisions, you say there's value to the company, immediate, not just from you, from the business, for everyone. And almost no cost. It's about conversations, it's about building relationships, it's about learning what the business is. And then at the end of the day, not being the roadblock, it's about helping them understand what those things are. That last piece of putting someone's name down as acceptance is the final key. Yeah. The senior managers understand the importance and cost of that. So they're very careful with that tool that they have. But at the end of the day, if they decide this is actually good enough, valuable, I'm going to put my name down. Again, still, company went through risk management process. Company understood the value and company made a business decision. This is worth the risk. Great. Let's move forward.
Yep. I mean, that's a win. On multiple levels, right?
Exactly.
And thank you for sharing that. A couple of things. One, nice being the person that's not signing off on the risk and shifting that ownership. Well done. But the old rugby pass, as they say. But no, I think you got to start somewhere, and I think changing culture. We're in the middle of a pandemic. There's a lot of things going on in civil unrest. It starts with a win, and if I can draw on that win, I think it was. Your engagement in education boils down to two things. You engage the business, you educated them on a risk management process, of which was cyber related, and they engaged you moving forward. Win, right? It's starting to change the culture, because prior to that, they would never have called you. And what I love about that, the outcome, is they shifted cyber and risk management left in the conversation, to use a kind of a DevOps term that you were talking about earlier, to address it from the outset. What is the upside potential of business enablement and growth, which every company wants to do and every employee wants to accomplish? But let's at least acknowledge the downside risk potential and make an informed decision. And
threat modeling, threat modeling, risk assessment. It's almost like secure development lifecycle for projects. It's a business secure development. And we got to be storytellers. We got to be educators. Those are the primary functions for security managers, or people, even not security managers, but in IT organization that are sort of wearing that as a second hat. That's the primary thing. All the tools and technology and all that is irrelevant if you're not going to. If you can't have that conversation, if you don't build that trust. That's probably what it boils down to: building a trust, a relationship between the teams. And you got to start with, not being the hammer. You got to start with, hey, let's try to help me understand. That's a really important. Help me understand. Works every time.
Yep, exactly. You can't be the human firewall. And one thing, right, just from our own experience and have seen organizations go through what you've gone through, one thing for the audience that's out there that's listening to Dmitry on that win was the next phase that we see and we recommend is, once you get that trust, It's creating a sort of some formality around it, and formality can be a nebulous term, but it's about creating a council, creating committee. I was on a panel at one time of CFOs, and some guy in the back, a true CFO, said, "What can we do that doesn't cost us anything to really drive, cybersecurity change?" Figures that you would ask that. I said, create a cross-functional working committee, and call it the cyber risk committee or whatever you want to call it. There's, IT risk, whatever. There's audit committees, whatever the term of the name of the committee is irrelevant. But start to engage and educate, right? And that's where I think you can really have multiple wins, like you just said. And then now you've created, for lack of a better term, delegates of the cyber team to then be in their business, because not everybody's going to have analysts to sit in every business project meeting. It's not realistic, especially now we have to do more with less. But creating that, leveraging that momentum of success that you had, and with some formality around how do we now create a committee, how do we now start evangelizing this at the business unit level to at least acknowledge this type of stuff. And that's really where I think it's not just a single department, where my hope, if we are able to do this successfully, is that security is not a single department. It's ingrained in the fabric of the organization, because everything we do needs to be done securely, right? And I think that's a long vision for many organizations, but I think it starts with the wins that you just articulated, which is engage, teach them something, make more informed decisions, and be a business enabler, not a business detractor. And I think we'll have more success being a velvet hammer than a sledgehammer if we're able to drive that culture shift through success. So, and fantastic.
And I want to add a couple of points here. I think that security work is never ending, right? It's always going to be there. But I think that everything we touch should be with an attempt to be able to walk away from it. We got to get to the point where security is not needed as a team. We got to get to the point where security is just a standard security mindset. Yeah. Risk management mindset is a standard MO for any team. That is culture. Someone said to me before, culture eats policy for breakfast. Yeah. No document, none of that is going to work if you don't have the culture, if you don't have people thinking this way. And that starts from a positive reinforcement, again, coming in and not being a block and sort of building these trust relationships. And then they're the ones that start asking the questions of their own people that you would be normally doing. And when that happens, my job is done. The company's secure.
Yep. It's the community policing analogy. See something, say something, right? Exactly. And that helps you scale, because there's only so much eyes and ears that you can do through a single lens or a single department. So couple of things that I want to just touch on and be conscious of time is this term digital transformation. It's been around for decades. Don't love it. Don't think anybody is. It's more modernizing. We're being forced to modernize. I'm not a clairvoyant, but I don't think we go back to normal. There's a ton of studies that say we're more productive at home, and culture is a whole different thing. There will be transformation from the workforce. It will be more digital. There's no question there. As a cyber leader, give us some insights into how you're viewing. I know that things are changing and they haven't been completely fleshed out in most organizations, but as things shift, whether they're forced or whether they're elective, how are you staying on top of that? How are you continuing to make sure that you're aligned to the business and their expectations?
It's a multi-pronged approach, I'd say. Part of it has to be about self-education. The resource management aspect of our jobs is very important, but within it, we have to find time to educate ourselves about everything or a lot of things that are happening in the technology world. We got to know what the things are out there, how they can be used. It doesn't have to be an in-depth knowledge, but it has to be continuous. We have to continue to learn. All those certification programs have it right. The continuous professional education credits, super important. And if you get them from reading articles, that's like some of the more important stuff. You learn those things and they make you dive into them. Now, having that makes you better prepared to engage business in these conversations. Now, the business is in disarray in many ways. this is an upheaval that usually takes years. We're talking about weeks and months, and in some cases days, even for some organizations. So a lot of decisions are made very quickly with just maintaining business continuity in mind, without long-term, strategic.
There's a reaction.
Yeah, exactly. It's all very reactionary. Hopefully, if you build a little bit of a culture within it, some of that already is going to involve thinking from security perspective. The business, I don't know, we are going to be deploying, a virtual Windows virtual desktops, or what they're called, the virtualization technology of some
The
kind.
VDI stuff.
VDIs, right? A variety of VDI vendors. Right, I didn't even have to do anything at our place. It's already coming out with MFA. It's already coming out with whitelisting. We're talking about web proxies that we're putting. Some things you needed VPN for example, is already being out with MFA and with IP whitelisting built in. This isn't being triggered by me having to say, okay, you must do it this way. This is the thinking process that are already happening at the level of those teams that are working to resolve these business issues.
Right.
It's on us still at the same time to be within those conversations. What is the business need? And so we talked about, establishing this knowledge and learning about business. That never ends. This has to be a continuous conversation. Mm-hmm. You talked about the risk, information security risk management committee or risk committee or whatever you want to call it, steering committee. That's one way to do it, but you have to maintain communication with business managers, because their world is changing right underneath them. And you may not be aware of all the things that are happening in their world. And you have to continue maintaining the communication, continue knowing and learning the big things that are changing for business. I have sort of weekly or biweekly meetings with majority of the business managers or leaders in different groups, because that's the time. It's not structured. We come in and we talk. Hey, what's new? What are you guys doing? And because the new things will pop up. Hey, this is what we ran into last week. This is what's facing us now. Okay, great. You seeing this? Joe's seeing this. We got 3 different business leaders facing the same issue. Okay, let's try and get together. And now we're talking about this communication, understanding, figuring out the risks again, threats and risks, and then seeing how we can help the business fix it. Now, all of that is sort of reactionary on our part. We are the reactive part, yep. But we are a tool. We are a tool, and they are our customers. We are providing a service. They are doing this as it's happening for them, and our reactive tool is what allows them to look into the future and actually make decisions 1 or 2 steps into the future better than if they were simply reacting on their own. I know it's not a clear answer, but innovation is driven by failure most of the time. The wheel is a failure to get something across by hand. It's just too heavy, right? And that's just what it's going to be across the board. Mm-hmm. And if we are part of the conversation, we can distill all that additional knowledge and technology and threats and risks into input at the point of inflection for the business. Then we're winning as a company.
That's a win.
And if you didn't build that connection, if you didn't build that relationship, you're not going to have that point where you can do that injection, and so everyone loses. So that's, again, coming back to having to build those relationships and having to maintain them. It's super important.
Yeah, super important. We're humans at the end of the day, right? We there's this interaction. We got to learn. We have feelings. We have opinions, and I think I always draw back on health analogies, right? Things are going to shift. Right. If something hits you and you have to change dramatically, there's a lifestyle change that you need to adjust, and you need to have the support structure of you have a heart attack. Right. But there's also some hygiene elements that I make an analogy of cyber risk management, and getting to that proactive risk conversation is like being a CrossFit athlete. It's a very mature state. Right. Not everybody's going to get there, and maybe ever. But you understand that that's possible, and that's great. You see these guys and girls that lift phenomenal things, and you're just like, wow, that's really impressive. I don't want to do that the whole time, right? It goes back to the culture elements, and that's just not something that, or I have the time to do, or the resources to do. But you have realistic expectations, and doing 9,000 push-ups in one day is not going to get you there, right? To your point, it's foundational building blocks that need to take place. And I think over year 2 years, you've probably seen that, where it starts with 1, 2, 3 wins. And then now you have that open door policy. You're breaking down those barriers. You've engaged the business so that we do react. I mean, this was a huge reaction that no one foresaw, that you were able to sustain it. And the business, more importantly, was able to make those informed decisions because of that collaboration and accountability of the seeds that you've been planting over your time there, which I think is great.
It's funny you mentioned CrossFit. I was expired now, but I was a CrossFit coach for a number of years. And in the CrossFit training seminars, they explain to you as you're getting towards being fit, which is, really fit, CrossFit fit.
Yeah.
Halfway there, you're you're good. And so even if you're not fit and you're not going to be able to do 9,000 push-ups in one day, simply going in that direction will get you to well at some point. And so as a company, as a human, you're not going to get to the end, although that's what you're aiming for. You're going to get well, which is great. At least get there.
Yeah, at least get there. And then you're in striking distance, right? I can't tell you how many times someone says, we need to be SOC 2 compliant. What are you doing today? Nothing. Okay, well, is the business are you losing money because you're not? No, but we want to be. Okay, well, I'm fat and 40, right? I'm not a CrossFit athlete, right? I went running today for 10 minutes. I thought I was going to die. So, baby steps, right? Maybe next week I'll get up to the 15-minute mark, and then where I can get a few more things. So like I've even learned myself that if you just don't do anything, it's not going to fix itself, 1. And 2, you can't do it all at once. It's just not going to happen. So how do you maintain consistency so that when you can react and be in the striking distance that I can now react if I need to, but at the same time if I can get to that well state, at least I'm in a good state.
Great analogy.
So a couple of things before we go. We're in the middle of this pandemic. We talked a little bit about business alignment, which is really the segment. And I think it's fantastic to hear anecdotally about what you're doing and how you've done it and the successes that you've had. I think the audience can glean a lot from that. If there are takeaways that we talked about so far, I think it was learn how the business works, understand what their tolerance for risk is, engage and educate as much as possible, whether even if it's informal, do it, lean into the business, so to speak, so that they know you, you know them, and that there's a collaboration there. Anything further for the audience as far as what people need to think about or maybe potentially do, or maybe what things that you're going to plan to do as we figure out this new normal, but more importantly, how we drive business success?
Maintain human connections. Super tough right now, staying from home, and that makes it tough. Reassess as things change. If we just continue with a 3-year plan or whatever you have in place right now, that's most likely going to fail. In fact, it needs to happen regardless, but the reprioritization, review, this grooming of what you have planned is super important. So it stays dynamic and you can adjust. And, wash your hands.
Yeah, exactly. Keep your mask on. Listen, Dmitry, thanks for the time. This was fantastic. Really appreciate you sharing your experience, your knowledge, and your insights into the business.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Patrick.
Thank you.